Hi everyone! Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into how a thrombus forms, why plaques and clots threaten our health, and what you can do right now to protect your blood vessels and live longer. In this video, you'll hear clear medical explanations, real-life stories, and practical steps you can start using today. No panic, just useful facts. Stay with us until the end. This topic matters for every person, and the last part contains simple actions that can truly change your risk.
Daniel, let's start with the scariest question. Is it true that people have begun dying from heart attacks and strokes more often? And are these no longer just diseases of the elderly?
Unfortunately, yes. Starting at around age 30, people are already having heart attacks and strokes, and each year the number of such patients grows. Many men don't even reach 50. Serious cardiovascular events happen to them earlier. I recently reviewed regional data. About 80% of people died from cardiovascular disease. In developed countries, it's the #1 cause of death. If you exclude third world countries where infectious diseases still rank first, here the leader is the heart and vessels. Cancer is in second place.
80% sounds like a sentence. Why so many? Is it genetics, the environment, or lifestyle?
The percentage can be a bit higher or lower in different regions, but the main factor is our lifestyle. It's overeating, tobacco, sugar. We live in an era of chronic energy poisoning. We consume far more than our bodies need. If you look at someone 100 years ago, a lump of sugar was a rarity, something a whole village might share for a week, and it was a celebration. Today, pure sugar is hardly eaten, but there are chocolate bars, candies, and everything else. White bread, by the way, didn't appear until relatively recently, about 150 years ago. Pasta, refined instant cereals, sausages, all that processed food, it simply didn't exist. Back then, the body had to work to digest food. People ate less. There wasn't the pattern of eating 3 full meals a day, plus constant snacking on the go. This chronic energy surplus creates pre-diabetes, then diabetes, and diabetes causes free radicals, damage to vessel walls, damage to genetic material, hence the rise in cancer, hence the rise in cardiovascular catastrophes.
So we're slowly frying ourselves with food?
Yes, and that's only half the problem. Besides eating more than ever, we move a lot less. People used to walk 10 kilometers to school and back, to work. Even if you rode a horse, it was still physical labor, fetching water, carrying things, doing chores. People lived actively. Now we sit, put our butt in the car, and go. Minimum movement, maximum calories. At some point, the vessels simply stop tolerating that regimen.
Look, to simplify, is it really true that cigarettes, chocolate, and that whole sweet and smoke combo actually create deadly plaques in the arteries?
Essentially, yes. All those things, tobacco, smoke, toxins, sugar, excess calories, day after day injure the vessel wall. And then cholesterol comes onto the scene. People think cholesterol is evil by itself, but at first it acts like a patching compound. It fills in the injured spots, the microcracks on the inner vessel wall.
So the body is like, oh, the wall tore. Let's put some paste on it, and it sends cholesterol there.
Exactly. Today a little damage, cholesterol patches it. Tomorrow again, patches it again. Day after day, year after year, eventually, instead of a smooth wall, a plaque starts to grow. At first it's small, then bigger, layer by layer, and at some point it becomes unstable and can rupture.
And that's the scariest moment, right?
Yes, when a plaque tears, a clot forms at the rupture site. It can either completely block the vessel right there, or the clot can be carried by the bloodstream and land in a narrower artery further downstream. That often happens with strokes. A plaque ulcerates, for example, at the carotid bifurcation, where it splits. A clot breaks off and flies to the middle cerebral artery. The result is a classic hemispheric stroke.
And if it's in the heart, then that's a heart attack.
Yes, if in the heart, a heart attack. If in the brain, a stroke. The mechanism is the same. There was a plaque, it ruptured, a clot formed, and blood stopped reaching part of the organ.
Back to cigarettes. What about e-cigarettes and vapes? Many people believe they're a light version and almost harmless.
The problem with vapes is very serious. Right now, they're a real scourge. School kids, students, young people, vaping everything. The difference from tobacco is that we have decades of research on classic cigarettes, and the harm is rock-solid proven. For e-cigarettes, we don't yet have long-term data, but from the logic and early observations, the story will be very similar. There's another nuance. You can vape endlessly. Indoors, outside, at home, at the computer, nicotine and other substances exposure can be much higher than with a conventional smoker, and anything in excess always causes problems.
So the question isn't only that it's harmful, but that people do it far more often?
Yes, plus there's a harsh story with children. Parents vape and leave the device on a table, a child picks it up, takes a puff, gets bronchospasm. If lucky, an EMS arrives in time, the child is resuscitated. If not, you can lose the child. Unfortunately, there are many such cases.
Sounds like every harmless coffee with chocolate and a safe vape is a small deposit toward a future heart attack.
That's roughly it. It's not a single cigarette or a single chocolate that kills. It's years of systematic small doses the body receives every morning like clockwork.
We've already talked about plaques and cigarettes, but let's go step by step. What happens to the vessels at the moment a person eats sugar again, smokes, inhales all that chemical stuff? What exactly breaks down there?
Let's start with anatomy. Inside, a vessel is lined with special cells, a single layer of flat epithelium called the intima. A key feature of these cells is that their outer surface carries a negative charge. Our red blood cells and other formed elements are also negatively charged. As a result, blood flows through vessels as if on a magnetic cushion. The cells repel the wall and each other.
So blood doesn't actually rub against the vessel wall?
Almost not. For example, when a red blood cell enters a capillary whose diameter is half that of the cell, it literally folds like a tube and squeezes through. That helps it deliver oxygen better, but it still passes smoothly because both the cell and the wall share negative charges and repel one another.
Nice design. What happens when things go off plan?
When blood sugar stays high constantly and other factors join in, toxic substances, inflammation, elevated homocysteine, the cells lining the vessel, the intima, begin to get damaged. There's a homocysteine theory. Raised homocysteine leads to free radicals that damage the vessel wall. Imagine a corridor with tiles on the wall. Somewhere a tile gets knocked off. The same happens in a vessel. An exposed raw patch appears.
And the body is like, we have a hole, patch it immediately.
Exactly. The first rapid response crew is cholesterol circulating in the blood. It acts like putty, filling those damaged spots. Then cells grow over it and things look normalized again. But if damage repeats every day for years, a cycle forms. Damaged, patched with cholesterol. Damaged again, patched again. That's how a plaque develops, growing layer by layer.
Why do plaques form in specific places rather than everywhere?
Because blood flows in vessels not chaotically, but in laminar flow, in layers that barely mix. The heart is cleverly arranged. It doesn't just shove blood forward, but imparts a twist to the flow. If it simply pushed blood straight, there would be many eddies, more turbulence. Valves would wear faster, and atherosclerosis would develop sooner. Even with that efficient system, there are spots where laminar flow breaks down, places of vessel splitting, bifurcations. Flows there inevitably swirl, and that's where the intima is most often injured and plaques form.
So at first, the body kind of saves us with a plaque, and later it becomes the problem?
Exactly. A plaque is initially a protective, life-saving mechanism. The body patches the hole so the vessel won't rupture and bleed. But it wasn't meant to store that patch forever. Macrophages arrive, cellular vacuum cleaners, meant to remove cholesterol by eating it. The problem is they can overeat and die right there. By ingesting solid cholesterol, they convert it into a more liquid form. Under the plaque, a so-called cholesterol lake can form, liquid cholesterol beneath a thin cap.
That sounds very unstable.
It is. These are called unstable plaques and are the most dangerous. There's a cap and beneath it a liquid lake. If that cap ruptures, thrombosis is almost guaranteed. Also, when a plaque ulcerates, clotting factors are exposed. They trigger a whole cascade of thrombus formation.
So, at some point, the interior of the vessel doesn't look like a smooth tube, but like a section of wall with missing tiles and a blister of putty ready to burst.
Very accurate comparison. And as soon as that blister pops in the wrong spot, what follows is a heart attack or a stroke. That brings us to the next question: when does thrombosis actually lead to death?
Here's the moment of truth. The plaque ruptured, a clot formed. Does that always equal death, or is it not always so fatal?
Not always, and not immediately. A lot depends on genetics and on how a person's circulation is arranged around the blocked main artery, what we call collaterals. There was a telling study back in Soviet times. They tied off the anterior interventricular artery in dogs and pigs, one of the heart's most important arteries. In other words, they artificially created a massive heart attack.
A gruesome experiment, but okay, science. What happened?
Not a single dog died. They survived the infarct, were ill for a couple of days, and then ran around. Pigs mostly died. The difference was that dogs formed bypass pathways behind the occlusion, while pigs did not. In other words, some species are genetically predisposed to rapidly create collaterals. Others almost never do.
So some organisms are like, okay, this road is closed, we'll build a detour. And others are like, road closed, that's it?
Exactly. The same applies to people. Some people's vascular networks are more like the dogs, others, unfortunately, more like the pigs.
Is it the same story with stroke?
Absolutely. Some people have a major cerebral artery completely blocked, yet thanks to collaterals, the brain still gets enough blood to get by. That person might recover from a stroke with almost no neurological deficit, not severely disabled, and certainly not dead. Others have a small artery occlude, and that's it, fatal outcome, because there are no bypass routes and blood supply can't reconfigure in time.
So we can compare two people, one with a huge problem who lives, another with a small one who dies simply because one had spare roads and the other didn't?
Yes, the size of the thrombosis is not the only factor. What matters is where it happened, whether collaterals exist, how quickly the person reached doctors, and what condition their vessels were in to begin with. So someone can endure a heart attack on their feet and only discover it later by ECG, while someone else can die from a single thrombosis immediately.
We keep talking about lifestyle, food, cigarettes, movement. But it feels like not everything is in our hands. Some people live correctly and still die young. What is the real main cause of death? Habits or genetics?
It's important to say honestly, we all have a basic source code. We inherit it from our parents, along with predispositions to certain diseases. There are, for example, familial hypercholesterolemia and familial hyperhomocystinemia. These are congenital metabolic disorders. In Switzerland, for instance, entire villages have been described with inherited hyperhomocystinemia. In such families, adolescents die of heart attacks and strokes at 16, 17 years old because plaques form in their vessels very early and very fast.
So the child barely had a chance to live and already has arteries like a 70-year-old.
Something like that. The problem is at the biochemical level, a failure in one link of a huge metabolic chain. Put simply, you can think of it as a chronic functional deficiency of vitamin B12, even if it's present in the diet. Because of this, homocysteine is not inactivated and builds up in the blood. High homocysteine is a powerful source of free radicals. They aggressively damage the vessel wall, and plaques form very early and very fast.
And that's where the teen heart attacks and strokes come from?
Yes, these people haven't had time to smoke much or to eat themselves into diabetes yet. Their vessels are already destroyed.
So the genetic code is the map we start with, and lifestyle is the speed at which we drive on it.
Perfectly put. Roughly speaking, genetics sets the predisposition. Lifestyle decides whether we take the accelerated route to heart attack and stroke, or, on the contrary, delay those problems as long as possible. Some people have a very poor base and must be twice as careful. Others have a better base and the body forgives more. But no one can completely cancel out the influence of lifestyle.
When I think of a healthy lifestyle, I still picture don't eat sugar, don't smoke, don't drink, you'll look better, like it's an aesthetic issue. But the more I listen to doctors and scientists, the more I realize it's not about appearance at all. It's about what will happen to you in 20, 30 years. Am I sensing that correctly?
Yes, you feel that very accurately. Most serious diseases after 40 are the consequence of our lifestyle. And it's important not only what we gave up, cigarettes, alcohol, etc., but how we live overall, how physically active we are, and how mentally healthy we are. Mental health, to be honest, is sometimes more important than physical health. It plays a colossal role.
In what sense? Like, think positive and everything will pass?
Not that simplistically, of course. But if you look at people who live to 90 plus with their minds intact and reasonably good health, they share one trait. They have a positive mindset and an interest in life. They didn't just drag themselves into old age. They live. They might be scientists, collectors, passionate hobbyists, or a grandmother with a garden who grows tomatoes no one else has. They're fired up about something. They have purpose.
So the body pulls the brain, or the brain pulls the body?
More like the brain pulls the body. There was an interesting experimental study. Researchers injected kerosene into the leg muscle of rats. In animals with intact brains, the inflammatory response was roughly the same. Then they removed different brain regions, and the inflammation proceeded differently depending on which area was damaged. So the brain directly influences inflammation, immunity, and how the body reacts. If you damage the nerve going to an arm or leg, the limb can begin to wither, even though blood and nutrients still reach it. The brain simply stops managing the tissues correctly. Therefore, first and foremost, mental health, a positive attitude toward life, having interests.
It feels like a person without purpose starts dying before any diagnosis shows up.
Very often that's true. You can wither at 30 if you've lost purpose, if there's no interest, no inner why. A person may not have the strength to raise their hand, not because the muscle is weak, but because the head is empty. I'll tell a story from the smoking area. Yesterday, I was talking with our IT guy. He recalled a case, a young athlete, a professional climber, just over 30. Not just a climber, a rescue climber. When something happens, he's in the helicopter and off, highly trained. Next to him was an old man, an honored master of sport in orientation, about 70 at the time. They were traveling to a competition. The old man sat and chain-smoked below more, while the climber nagged him. Smoking is harmful, you're killing yourself, and so on. They almost fought and decided to test who could run faster. The start was about 10 kilometers away. In the end, the old man overtook the young athlete by a good margin, finished first, and lit a cigarette.
So the below-more smoking grandpa beat the super-trained climber?
Yes. Obviously, this isn't an endorsement of smoking, but it's a vivid example. Attitude to life, the inner spring, sometimes matters more than a formal set of right habits.
You also said it's not only about diagnoses, but how a person lives with them.
There's harsh statistics about people who lost limbs. For those who lost one leg, 5-year survival is about 20%. For those who lost both, about 10%. And it's not because their legs fell off due to an appalling overall condition. Many of them could have lived long lives. The problem is mental. People can't adapt to the new reality. I'm not the same. I'm disabled now. Life is over. Then follows a chain. Alcohol, cigarettes, isolation, refusal to socialize, refusal to be active. The person simply doesn't want to live and dies.
So, two people with the same amputation can live completely different lives, and the difference isn't medicine, but mindset.
Absolutely. I had a very telling example. I was friends with a woman whose father had both legs amputated because of atherosclerosis. He's a smoker, and he still smokes. It's been more than 10 years, now about 12. He lives in a private house, digs his garden, does repairs, runs the household. The only thing he doesn't do is drive. He lives a full life with interest. We recently did diagnostics on him. From the 3 coronary arteries, only one is functioning. He's had at least 2, maybe 3 heart attacks on his feet. And one carotid artery is completely occluded. By rights, he should have had a stroke, but he didn't. And he has an excellent outlook on life. He says, I need to live another 20 years. It's interesting to see how this all ends. He's 68 now.
So, he's more alive than many healthy people.
Yes, and his friends, who once lost just one leg, most of them have died over the years, not because their tests were worse, but because they couldn't adapt to life after amputation. That's the power of mental state. Same medical circumstances, different outcomes because of different minds and different attitudes towards themselves and life.
We've already touched on mental health, but let's take stress apart separately. It seems like everyone is stressed these days. Megacity life, work, deadlines, noise, crowds, you can feel it physically. So the question is stress always bad, or can it be useful?
Stress is not the enemy. It's necessary. There are just 2 kinds of stress. One is positive stress. The other is chronic, destructive stress. Positive stress is when you jump with a parachute, go to the mountains, run a marathon. You get a powerful surge of adrenaline and dopamine, and then a positive resolution. You're alive, satisfied, euphoric, energized. Interestingly, active people, successful top managers, entrepreneurs, athletes, they subconsciously hunt for that kind of stress. It makes us stronger, more resilient, faster.
So healthy stress is like training for the nervous system.
Yes, exactly. It's training. After that stress, you become better, tougher, more confident. Then there's the other kind, chronic stress. It wears you down day after day like a drop carving stone. It's when someone goes to a job they hate for years, when life constantly feels like it's crushing you, when there's constant anxiety, tension, a sense of unfinished business. That kind of stress doesn't make us stronger. It destroys.
Like unfinished tasks that trail behind you?
Exactly. An unfinished cycle is very toxic. You start something, quit, and every time you pass it, you think, I need to finish that. It presses and presses for years. I did an experiment with friends. We wrote down 10 wishes every morning. Unexpectedly, half of them could be done today. Jump with a parachute? Go sign up. Travel somewhere? Buy a ticket. Start exercising? Just go out and run a kilometer. But we're used to postponing. That postponing turns into chronic stress.
And that shows up in the body?
Directly. Chronic stress raises blood pressure, destroys sleep, alters hormonal balance, causes hypertension, and ultimately leads to cardiovascular catastrophes. There's also psychosomatics, when mental state directly manifests in the body. And there's somatic psychic, when physical problems break the psyche. It works both ways. Childhood slouching, stuttering, autonomic dysfunction, often these are consequences of family stress, conflicts, pressure. A child bends because they're being psychologically broken.
So, stress can be both salvation and the core of destruction.
Exactly. Acute tension that ends in victory is safe. Chronic tension that never goes away destroys vessels no less than sugar and cigarettes. If you have to choose between two stresses, I'd always recommend the one that ends with a breath of freedom, not another turn of burnout.
You've mentioned several times that the brain rules everything. Inflammation, behavior, even how the body lives. Can we break this down with a harsh example?
There's a striking story. A colleague of mine from Donbass, when he was studying medicine in Lviv, was taken to the anatomy museum. There was an exhibit, the skeleton of a child who, during World War II, was essentially raised by cows for a whole year. The village was destroyed. The child was taken in by cows. He lived with them, walked, grazed, moved with the herd. His hands had formed into hoof-like shapes. He moved on all fours. And the strangest thing, there were bony growths on his skull, little ridges.
So the child literally remade his body to be like a cow.
Yes, he had never seen a human example of how to use hands or walk on two legs. The brain adapted to the environment, and the body followed. And this isn't a single case. Feral children in various forms have been recorded before and still appear today. For example, in villages where parents drink heavily and a dog or cat effectively raises the child. There are documentaries showing such children. At 6 to 8 years old, they don't speak. They have feline habits, and they resemble animals more than people.
What happens to them later? Can they be returned to a normal life?
That's the tragedy. In all documented cases, such children almost never survive past 14 to 17 years. When puberty begins, hormonal surges, psychological upheaval, personality formation, they have no normal role models. They don't know how to behave in society, how to form relationships, how to live. They simply can't cope, both physically and mentally.
So the absence of a human environment shortens life no less than harmful habits.
Yes, and this applies not only to feral children. Look at children placed in orphanages from infancy. On average, they live to about 30 to 35 years. They can't build families, can't adapt, even if they didn't end up in criminal or destructive environments. They simply lack models for what a family is, how to resolve conflicts, how to care for others, how to cope with difficulties. Many of the orphanage-raised people I've known are no longer alive. Some drowned, some died in accidents, some from illnesses, including vascular diseases.
What if the child is removed from the family later, not in infancy?
That's the key point. Children taken from a family at age 5 to 7 often later build families and socialize normally. Why? Because by that age, whatever the parents were like, the child has already seen role models, who a mother is, who a father is, how people communicate, how they argue, how they make up. Children pick up not what we tell them, but what we do. I'd even say they pick up what we feel.
So a child is like a super sensitive antenna you can't fool.
Exactly. Dog handlers and hunters say, you can't fool a dog, it senses everything. A child senses even more finely. We often deceive our children thinking they won't understand, but they understand everything, on the level of energy, mood, and behavior. And that environment, the presence or absence of love, acceptance, and normal role models directly affects their health, life expectancy, and ultimately, their vascular risks.
We've already discussed stress in general, but there's one particular kind of stress, the one tied to postponing your desires. It seems like a mass problem. People have dreams,
plans, ideas, and they stay in their heads for years. How dangerous is that?
Dangerous? Very. Because postponing is also chronic stress. It's just rarely called that. There's a concept, an unfinished cycle. You start something, stop, and it hangs inside you like a flimsy door that keeps banging in the wind. It reminds you every day, quietly but persistently. For example, a book you started but never finished, or a dream you think about every month but never approach. Every time you pass by it, the brain makes a small note. I didn't do it again. I postponed it again. I let myself down again. And it accumulates.
Sounds like slow burnout stretched over years.
Exactly. And people underestimate how destructive it is. Once my friends and I ran an experiment. Every morning we wrote down 10 wishes. After a couple of weeks, a powerful insight came. Half of those wishes could be fulfilled today. Not in a year, not when there's time, not when I earn enough. Today. Jump with a parachute? Just call and sign up. Travel somewhere? Buy a ticket. Start exercising? Put on sneakers and step outside. But most people choose postponement over action. And that postponement becomes part of the personality. Energy drains away, motivation falls, life looks gray. The body responds with higher blood pressure, anxiety, insomnia.
So a dream you don't fulfill turns from wings into an anchor?
Couldn't put it better. A person who constantly postpones their desires begins to live someone else's life. The body is very sensitive to that. If there's no forward movement inside, no sense that you're heading towards something meaningful, the body starts signaling blood pressure, sleep disturbances, anxiety, pain, fatigue. Postponement is a quiet killer. It doesn't shout. It simply makes life dim and health fragile over time.
So in that sense, fulfilling a dream is like heart attack prevention.
Absolutely. When a person takes a step toward their dream, even a small one, a completely different chemical cocktail switches on in the brain. Dopamine, interest, energy appear. It's biology, and it really protects the heart. But if you tell yourself later every day, it becomes chronic stress that year after year weakens the vessels. So sometimes the best contribution to your health isn't giving up sugar, but doing the thing you've been postponing half your life.
We've talked a lot about how people end up with heart attacks and strokes. Now let's get practical. What exactly should you do so you never reach the operating table?
The most important thing is to understand one fact. People move toward serious health problems over 10, 15, 20 years. Then they expect one pill or one operation to reset everything to factory settings. That doesn't happen. Very often, a 50-year-old says, I've been healthy my whole life. Now I have to take pills every day and change my lifestyle? I don't want to. But disease is the result of decades, not a single unlucky month.
But we live in the age of miracle injections, Ozempic, effortless weight loss, miracle ads. Is it all an illusion?
Ozempic is not an illusion. It really works, but it's not magic and it's not a free bonus. There's already a new generation, tirzepatide. It acts not only on the stomach and brain, reducing appetite, but also on adipose tissue, increasing fat breakdown. Its weight loss effectiveness is higher than semaglutide, Ozempic. But people forget the main thing. The fat they carry was accumulated over years, and everyone wants to remove it in a couple of months.
So a drug can help, but if you keep living the same way, it's pointless.
Exactly. If it's prescribed for a real medical reason, not for looks, it must be part of a system: nutrition, movement, routine, and monitoring. If we talk about basic, accessible measures, intermittent fasting 16-8 works very well. You don't eat for 16 hours and consume food within an 8-hour window. With this pattern, apoptosis is triggered. The body finds it advantageous to recycle old sick cells, use fat stores, and unload systems.
So sometimes the best detox is simply not eating?
To a degree, yes, but important. This is for relatively healthy people without severe illnesses, and it must be done sensibly. There are other approaches, keto or paleo diets, where the focus is on proteins and fats, meat, fish, eggs, cottage cheese, oils, vegetables, and a strong reduction of fast carbohydrates. Essentially, this resembles how people ate 500, 1,000 years ago, before white bread, abundant sugar, fast food, and processed products.
But you said civilizations were built around carbohydrates.
Yes, all major civilizations were built around a crop that provides carbohydrates year-round. Asia, rice; Maya, maize; Europe, wheat. Carbohydrates gave people stability. When you're not starving, you can think beyond survival. Paint, study the stars, build cities. But we swung from one extreme to another. Food used to be scarce, now it's abundant, and often in the cheapest, most harmful form. White bread, sweets, cheap carbs, they're the easiest to buy and overeat.
You had a harsh example with a friend in diabetes. Tell it.
Yes, a real case. A friend calls, "Listen, I'm sick. My glucose measured 36. For the last couple of weeks, my eyes are inflamed, conjunctivitis. I run to the toilet often, extreme sleepiness, foreskin inflamed. What's wrong with me?" I told him, "Congratulations, you have diabetes." We reviewed his diet. Per day, about 5 large flatbreads, around 10 chocolate bars, not candies, whole bars, all washed down with sweet coffee, day after day after day. He completely changed his diet, almost eliminated carbs, kept a little dark bread and normal food. He lost about 30 kilograms. Glucose normalized, complaints disappeared. Sleepiness, frequent urination, inflammations, all gone.
So the body started climbing out of the pit as soon as they stopped shoveling sugar on it.
Yes, often the body doesn't need a miracle. It needs you to stop interfering.
Someone hears this and thinks, okay, Monday, new life. I'll quit sugar, alcohol, cigarettes, go to the gym, do 16-hour fasting. Is that a workable strategy?
That strategy has a very high risk of relapse. There's an idea from Zealand's reality transurfing about pendulums. If you swing a pendulum hard one way, it will swing back equally hard the other way. Sudden decisions like, from today, everything is new, face huge internal resistance. Some people hold on, but most relapse. A far more reliable strategy is small steps. Improve your lifestyle by at least 1% a day.
So it's the story that after a year, you don't get 365%, but a huge cumulative change.
Yes, there's a famous story about a British cycling team. A new coach didn't promise a revolution. He said, "We'll improve everything by 1%. Slightly lighten the bikes, slightly improve mechanics, slightly tweak nutrition, slightly optimize sleep, slightly focus on recovery." Those tiny improvements accumulated and led them to wins, Tour de France, Olympics. It's the same with the body. 1% better nutrition, 1% more movement, 1% better sleep, 1% less procrastination. In a year, you're a different person, different vessels, a different heart, and a very different heart attack risk.
You've been in medicine for 16 years. People usually see only the result, a life saved, a successful operation, photos on social media, but few understand what happens behind the scenes. What is the hardest part of this job?
The hardest thing is when you did everything right and the person still died. It happens. Every doctor has their own graveyard. That's not a figure of speech, it's reality. Sometimes a patient with a heart attack or stroke arrives, you go into surgery, you work an hour, 2, 3, and you hit a stone wall. Nothing helps. The condition collapses right on your table. And you realize the organism couldn't cope. Not because you didn't try or didn't want to, but because sometimes medicine and the human body lose.
That sounds unbearably hard. How do you cope with such cases?
Different ways. Sometimes it's very hard. Sometimes you get angry at yourself, but you learn to live with it. Sometimes you understand you chose the wrong tactic, not negligence, not laziness, just a choice that seemed optimal at the time. Later, in hindsight, you see it should have been different, and that can cost a life. But medicine is not mathematics. There isn't a single correct solution. There's probability, experience, intuition, and hundreds of factors we don't even know about.
You said you were an average student once. Now you're one of the best in your field. How did that happen?
Yes, I had C's in most subjects, except surgery. Anything involving cutting, understanding the inside, I had top marks. I never wanted to be an internist. I only wanted surgery. But COVID moved me into internal medicine for 2 years. Honestly, I was a better internist than many internists, because the main thing in medicine isn't grades, it's the desire to help. A doctor who wants to figure things out will find the information, find the right method, call a colleague who knows more, and fight for the patient to the last. You can be brilliant and talented, but if you don't have a sincere desire to help, it's useless.
What gives you the strength to continue, to avoid burnout and not lose meaning?
3 things. First, the thrill, real joy. When you save someone, perform a difficult operation, when you saw death close and pulled the patient back, the adrenaline is comparable to a parachute jump. Second, growth. My parents always kept learning. My father is a veterinarian. He still goes to conferences and reads literature. We argue a lot. He favors alternative medicine. I favor evidence-based medicine. But he's my main example of how a person should keep developing their whole life. Third, responsibility. When you see how many people need you, you have no right to stagnate or relax. And I remember my first operation. I was about 7. I assisted my father. That feeling that you can help lives on.
So being a surgeon is not just a profession, it's almost a way of life?
It's a calling. It's not always easy, but it gives what no other job gives. The chance to see that your hands are someone's chance to live another life. Next, the final part, advice that can really save a life.
Let's finish as practically as possible. Someone has listened to our conversation. They may already feel fear, anxiety, thoughts like heart attack, stroke, plaques, stress, genetics. What one piece of advice can you give them that could actually save their life?
The most important thing is to live a full life. Not merely exist, not endure, not just make it to retirement, but live. Don't deny yourself everything, but know your limits. That's hard because everyone chooses their own boundary. Still, living fully is critically important for health. If you work at a job you hate, change it. Do what you truly want to do. Many people simply live someone else's life because it's convenient for someone. That's what parents said. Mortgage, stability, what will people say? As a result, a person goes against themselves every day, and the body senses it perfectly. When you start living your life instead of someone else's script, everything changes immediately. Mental health, physical condition, energy level, even your attitude toward habits. You suddenly begin to take better care of yourself, not because you have to, but because you want to be healthy for the life you chose.
So the main prescription isn't just about vessels, it's about life in general.
Yes, you can eat perfectly, run marathons, not smoke, not drink, and still hate your job, your reality, and yourself every day. Or you can honestly ask yourself, am I living the life I want? When the answer is yes, the vessels, the heart, and the mind all start working very differently.
Then let's end on that. Friends, live the life you want, not the one others expect of you, not the one imposed on you, but the one that lights you up inside. That's the end of our podcast. Subscribe, leave your thoughts in the comments. Take care of your vessels and your life.